Okay, thank you very much. Okay, it's 2 o'clock on the 22nd of November. Time for a cabinet meeting, virtual cabinet meeting. I might remind you that this has been live streamed and it will be recorded for posterity. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I note that I think Councillor Gray is having difficulty getting in, so we will initially give his apologies, but I know he was coming because I talked to him earlier on. So I know he's having some difficulties. So with that, that is the only person who isn't here at the moment. So the next item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I ask that the Cabinet approve them, please? I will formally move.
And I'll formally second, Leader.
Thank you very much. Next item is to receive any declarations of interest. And I think, yes. Margaret, you have yes. One.
Yes, please. On item 13, the housing revenue account, I'm a council tenant.
Yeah, and you have dispensation to speak and stay at the meeting, etc. So you have full dispensation. Okay, thank you for that. There are no others. In that case, what I'll do is I'll go to the next item, which is a reference. It's a reference from the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, and it's in relation to the Barry Biomass Independent Review Report. If you recall, there was a resolution to council, which subsequently asked us to take an independent review. That independent review was carried out by a planning barrister, Annabelle Graham-Paul, and that was brought to Cabinet. We then took it to the Scrutiny Committee, where they had a full debate on it. There was a public speaker who made some comments and made some suggestions, which were in the main refuted, I think. Some of the members took some questions of the monitoring officer of the independent barrister, who was also present. I have to say that the report is a very comprehensive report, because I was there too, and it does cover all the aspects. I don't intend to go through all the issues within it, and the reason for that being that I think the review covered all the elements that was required, because that was basically to find out whether or not we carried out all the planning applications relating to the biomass plant were correct or otherwise. The review was taken by the barrister. She gave her opinion. That was presented to both Cabinet previously and Scrutiny. Certain questions were asked and answers were given, but one of the upshot of the report itself was that they wished this to be discussed at full council. Now, to be honest, that was always the intention anyway, and I think I've actually made that public previously. So you can read for yourself. It's a full and comprehensive report. I think my personal opinion is I think that the barrister's opinion is reasonable and rational, but it will be a debate for council. So what I intend to do is to say that we note this report, but we do pass it on to council for consideration, and that would probably be, I guess, on the 6th of December, which is the next council meeting. So unless anybody wants to take any issues with this, as far as I'm concerned, the review was carried out, the answers were given, and if we need a debate, then the place to have the debate would be at council and not necessarily here. And I can see that Councillor Gray has joined us. I explained you were having some difficulties getting in, Ben.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just put my hand up to say, just to clarify, I don't have any declarations of interest, and apologies for being slightly late.
Okay, fine. You haven't got any. That's good. Okay, so what I'm proposing is this: a very comprehensive report of what was said and what happened at the Scrutiny Committee. It is a request to go to council, which is what always been my intention anyway, because that's where it started. That's where it should end, and that's what I proposed. Eddie, you want to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I just wanted to, whether it needs a second, to confirm, I agreed with you that yes, it was intended to go to council, and there's been plenty of debate, and I can't say I'm looking forward to another debate in public, but at least the members have had opportunity to put their views across, particularly in the scrutiny. So yeah, second your
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. In that case, I'll go on to the next item, which is another reference from the Performance, Resources and from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. It's in relation to the County Borough of the Vale Glamorgan Electoral Arrangements Order 2021. I don't know, Eddie, you want to take this or do you want me to do it? I don't mind. But basically, it's a report come forward, and that this again has to go to council for consideration anyway. So if you want to come in, Eddie.
Yeah, I agree with you. Again, it's quite comprehensive, the report, and the good thing about it as well is that all members have had an opportunity to look at it and discuss it, but clearly it needs to go to council for full agreement, so happy with that. Okay,
so basically what I'm going to recommend is the report be noted, that the polling districts as detailed in Appendix B, the report be noted, that we also request a note that the polling stations, because there was one amendment which was picked up at the committee, was that the polling districts as detailed in Appendix C is subject to the deletion of the reference of the polling district JGO, as it was a typographical error, and that we endorse the report and send it to council for consideration, and also that we refer it to the community liaison committee and all town and community councillors within the Vale, because it does affect those as well. But this obviously will need to go to council for full ratification so that it can take effect from the 5th of May 2022, so that they will be in line for the elections the day after. So if everybody's happy with that, we will do that. The next item is again another reference from the Corporate Performance and Resources, again in relation to the last report really. It's in relation to polling places and polling stations, and there was a mini review of those of the new boundaries and the new polling stations within it. As I said, they've had to review it. Basically, the committee approved the changes of the polling stations. They asked it to be referred to Cabinet for approval, so I would move that it is approved, and that also subject to Appendix 5 being amended to refer polling stations A and B being within the Glenbrook Inn, that's within Cardiff Ward. They've amended it slightly, so that was reported to the committee that we requested this is referred to council for full consideration with a view to approving the proposed changes with immediate effect in relation to all town and community councils and the community liaison committee, and also sent to the town and community councils and community liaison committee. But it will go to council again for full ratification so that they can take effect within immediate effect, but more particularly in time for the elections in May. Eddie.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Again, yeah, thank you. I'll second that, and also this again. Relevant ward members have been consulted with this, and some changes have been made. So it's great that working relationship has brought this forward. Many reviews. Only reason for that is because there's the key areas are being focused on the required change. So
indeed, and there was, as I say, within the report, it does talk about the issues within Barrack, Buttrells, Carrick, Cowbridge, Gibbonsdown Court, Lantwick Major, and also Wenvo, St Nicholas, Lancarver, and Peterston. So he's had a full review. Peterston, Super Ely, and indeed Sully too. So it is a full review, as I say. All local members have been consulted, because I know I've been consulted as a member of the Cardiff Board. So this again has to go to council. So we're all happy with that, and we'll deal with it there. Okay, thank you very much. Next item is the minutes of the Glamorgan Heritage Coast Advisory Committee. This is for noting, I think, and I know Liz was present at this one. I don't know whether or not you want to make any comments, because I know you did. You did congratulate them on the summer fun of activities within the report itself.
I did indeed, Leader. I mean, attending this group is an absolute joy, actually, and it's a sort of highlight of the meetings, a highlight of my year. It's well worth a browse of the content, because it does give details of the wide range of information, wide range of activities that are going on there. And as I said, we had an update on the summer of fun activities, which, you know, we know are hugely wide ranging right across the council, but some of the stuff that our countryside and Heritage Coast team did were things like rock pooling and stuff. You know, we'd said about giving feedback to Welsh Government. I gave feedback to the Minister when he visited Art Central, whether that had any impact, because we've got funding for Christmas and Easter holidays now, which is really good news. And then the other thing is there was an update from Colin Cheeseman, our county ecologist, and he was talking about some of the work being done under the local nature partnership, and that is moving forward apace. So a really productive couple of hours, a very enjoyable couple of hours, demonstrates us working in partnership with a whole range of people on the Heritage Coast, and I would move we note.
Thank you. No, I agree, and I noticed that the new plan for the Nature Recovery Action Plan was discussed for the next 5 years. So it's good. It's good news, and there was a lot of comments made in there about the work that's been carried out over the last couple of months too. So I'm happy to second. Has anybody got any other comments in relation to that? No. Good. Thank you very much. In that case, the next item is the Shared Regulatory Services Joint Committee. And I know that Councillor Eddie Williams attends that, and I noticed that it was mostly based around things on audit and the plans for the future. I don't know if Eddie, you want to make any comment, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It's when I see a reference like this, it's only 6 pages. I think it belies the hundreds of pages that actually undergo in the report, and also it doesn't give credit to the staff, in particular the service across the 3 councils, that we work in collaboration. We're well aware that the regulator have been dealing with the COVID measures, and as we're still in the middle of that, there's still quite a pressure on that. But if I go through the reference itself, it talks about the audit. The audit was delayed slightly, but in essence, the outcome of that is the council and the regulatory services in particular are working really well, and got a good report from that. So that was good news from that. We then got an update of the sort of the works that the regulatory services have been doing, and it's incredible. You know, we talk about communicable diseases, which is obviously relevant at the moment, but also the things that we have to do with different businesses, and there's regulations that's been constantly, regulations. Welsh Government have been changing those quite considerably over the last year or so, and we've with the plan, it went into detail about the actual checking on this, the ratings and how the matching standards are required. The head of services met with Food Standards Agency just to agree a plan, and that has been amended, because the reality is it's not possible for us all to deal with all the different levels. Certain establishments are obviously at different risk levels, so the plan's been adapted to address those at a higher risk, and the Food Standards Agency agreed to that. But what it does highlight is the as you're aware, the staff have been utilised and regulatory for the track and trace and everything else, so there's been additional pressure on that. And really, the service hasn't got sufficient staff, and they're looking at improving that status. Pleased to state that the actual budget itself for the regulatory service came under budget. It was an underspend, but we're going to utilise that, subject to the council and cabinet's view here, that it's accepted that that's used to provide the staff that are required to meet the requirements that we're putting in the business plan. So that's add to that, we've got the change of head of service, so we're in the process of recruitment for that, and that'll take, obviously, change of head of service by April next year, so we're in the process of recruitment for that. But also, there's also lots of good news about People don't like it, but the reality is prosecutions. And we've got some prosecutions that have been really successful. The team have managed to sort out. I've got to watch what I say because some of the cases are still in the courts and being, as appeals. But the reality is, you'll see something on X-ray, and that's one highlight. And one of the prosecutions has occurred, and there's been prosecutions against people selling fake goods and things like that. So the service as a whole really does its job protecting people of Vale, Bridgend and Cardiff. So I'd just like to hope members look at the report, and also the public, and look at the wider report that goes through this reference. And so move. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. I'm happy to second that. As you know, it was something I used to be involved in. But it is interesting the fact that, because of the amount of work they've got, they've adopted a risk-based approach on high-risk premises, which is the right approach, I think. So, we're looking at the right things. So, yeah, I'm happy to agree that. Everybody agreed? Yes, I hope. Okay, now we'll go into the nitty-gritty of the report itself. This is a report in relation to revenue monitoring for the period of 1st of April to the 30th of September, and obviously a revised budget for 2021-22. The report itself does outline the position with regard to the revenue budget for that period, and takes into account ongoing impact of the pandemic on the council's finances, which are considerable. And because of that, the revenue position for 21-22 continues to be challenging for both the council, both operationally and financially, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We've been very lucky because funding has been available from Welsh Government to cover some of those financial pressures, but they only will continue until the end of the financial year. The funding available for social services by care by the Hardship Fund will now also taper off during the year, remaining in the financial year. So that's something that we need to keep a very keen eye on. Claims continue to be made to Welsh Government on a monthly basis, obviously in arrears. So we claim for what we've spent for COVID-related expenditure. And for the first 6 months of the financial year, the council has claimed over £6.7 million, of which 6.1 million had been received. Some of it is still in abeyance, and some of it is not acceptable or won't be paid, but that's reasonable because we know about that and we talked about that before. The monthly breakdown of these figures, it can be shown in the table itself and at paragraph 2.2 of the report, if anybody cares to look. The financial support with regards to the loss of income is being done on a quarterly basis too, and there are quarterly claims going in, and the total amount claimed in the first 2 quarters has been £617,000. Now, at this time of the year, the original budget is usually reviewed for any required adjustments, and any amendments to the budget is calculated. The amended budget for the 21-22 is outlined in Appendix 1 to the report. These adjustments are made, they don't have any overall effect on the net budget, and really accounting adjustments largely out of control of the services themselves. There's also a table at paragraph 210 of the report, and that details the current projections for this year. The key changes since the last monitoring report is that there are now projected overspends in learning and skills, in addition to those already reported in social services and also environmental and housing. All of the reported overspends will be met from the reserves held by those services. So that's something that has to be picked up within their current budgets. The details of each directorate are contained within the report, and the position will be continued to be monitored, but there is a full breakdown of it in the report itself. The report also details the projected favourable balances on the general policy budget due to favourable variance of £2 million relating to capital charges, which basically we didn't borrow, so we didn't have the charges. And the current estimates projected that the council tax budget will overturn with a surplus of collection of £2 million. Basically, that's down to lots of areas, things like, for example, there were some delayed payments during last year, during the pandemic. There were various issues in relation to that. We're also now picking up bad debt, and we're also looking at things like having court appearances, which we couldn't have last year. So that's adding to, in essence, in essence, you could argue that some of the things we would have picked up last year, we're now picking up this year. So it is looking better than it was. So we are having a better income than we thought we would have. However, in that case, due to the uncertainty around the level of the settlement for 22-23, because we have no idea what it's going to be at the moment, and the value of the cost pressures, which we will see later in the reports to come, what we will be doing is, and we're proposing to do this, is that the £4 million is transferred into the Council General Fund, and its use will be considered by the Budget Working Group when it's taken into account all the factors formulating a balanced revenue and capital budget for the final proposals, which will be presented to Cabinet and to Council in February and March. So we will be going through the exercise. Later we have the initial estimates. That will be going to all scrutiny committees. It'll be coming back to Cabinet. Hopefully we'll have a bit more information in relation to the settlement by then. Going back to this year, we will be doing an extra step of going to another scrutiny committee, coming back to Cabinet before we finalise it to go to the Council in March. Also, as part of the final revenue proposals for 21-22, an efficiency target of £500,000 was set for the Council. No efficiency targets were set for schools, but the services are currently working on schemes to achieve these targets. However, we have to say it is anticipated that there could be a shortfall of £170,000 against that target. But clearly, we will still be looking at those during the course of the year. As I said, the report details the position in terms of the expenditure, but also the efficiency targets on a service by service area on the current projections, which will obviously change by the end of the year. And we can also look for further clarification on grant funding, because currently we believe there won't be any grant funding, or if there is a reduced amount of grant funding in the coming year to come. So basically what the report recommends is that the position with regard to the authority's 21-22 revenue budget be noted. 2, that the amended revenue budget for 21-22 as set out in Appendix 1 be approved, and that the report be referred to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee for consideration. I don't know if everybody wants to highlight anything within their own areas. We have done things before. As I said, there's some unplanned use of reserves, and you can see that in paragraph 210 in relation to learning and skills, social services, and environmental and housing. And it also refers to the transfer of the £4 million to reserves. I don't know if everybody's got any comments to make. Peter, you want to come in, please?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, if I may, picking up neighbourhood services and the unplanned use of reserves. I feel that it's covered very well within the report from paragraph 2.20. But I think it's only fair to say that some of those difficulties are certainly going to continue for the rest of this financial year, and I think likely into at least the beginning of the next. And in addition to that, we have suffered from indirectly from the shortage of HGV drivers, and indeed problems with the supply chain, causing delays and therefore sometimes further costs. And I fear they are ongoing with no specific end in sight. And I just like to sort of place on record my appreciation to those frontline crews who, despite all that, have actually sustained a curbside collection of recyclables, kitchen waste, black bag waste, and even the non-statutory garden waste, although I do concede that it's been the garden waste, because of its non-statutory nature, is the one that's often had to suffer to sort of spare the staff and the drivers to maintain the other. So it's a case of thank you ever so much, all the teams and men and women involved in doing that. But I don't see an immediate or short-term end in those pressures.
Okay, thank you. I think that's absolutely fair to say that. But we still carried out most of the services, and yes, there are pressures, and some of the pressures we now got them in education and learning, but social care is a massive one, and that's not going away. And I can see that Ben wants to make a comment, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And I think you've already articulated a number of the pressures, and I think it's worth noting that in any given year, it's a challenge to land on a particular figure when pressures and people's circumstances will change during the year. And so you take that and add COVID into the mix as well, and that's what we're seeing here. And I think it was really important to note about the hardship grants and those recharges, because they have been absolutely vital for being able to keep somewhere close to where we are in terms of the revenue budget. And this is the reason why we have earmarked reserves. This is why social services will continue to be able to look to facilitate people's care. And I think, I echo Councillor King's comments with regards to the work that goes on. It's our job to make sure that we put the finances and policies in the best position to allow people to get on and do the job. The people who need the care just need to understand that, it's going to be there, or we're going to be trying our hardest to get it there. And, it's particularly challenging, and it's well documented in the national press with regards to recruitment problems in social care. But I must say we had a very good recruitment event recently in Penarth, and there are lots of people who are interested in recruiting carers, and those that went along and spoke certainly found it a rich and enriching experience, and certainly learning more about the profession. So I hope more people can take their lead and join in and become a carer. But the budget position is as laid out, and it will continue to be a challenge. And just a final note ahead of future conversations about following year's budgets, a large number of carers are on a minimum wage, which is about to go up by 6.6%. It needs to be borne in mind when we're talking about percentage increases. This is what drives a lot of that underlying cost of commissioning care, and it's something we can't get away from in terms of providing that service to people. Thank you.
No, I think a fair point, Ben. Margaret, do you want to come in, please?
Yeah, I think every department is going to be in difficulties, and I think we have to look at this budget and everything very carefully. But housing is finding that materials are going up in price quite a bit, and some of them we cannot get at the moment. So we are struggling in some repairs, but we are getting most of them done. But we will be struggling if we can't get the materials, with the prices as well and the delivery. But I think we're all suffering in one way or another.
Indeed. And this is a snapshot, let's be fair, because the situation is fluid. It's unfortunate, like, for example, this year, children's services and adult services are overspending. Hopefully, at the end of the year, we may get our bonus packages that sometimes come in from Welsh Government in terms of grants. But hopefully we can get to the end of the year in a better position. And now I can see Margaret, you want to come back in, and Liz, you want to come in, please. Margaret, you're on mute. No, you're finished. Okay, Liz.
Thank you, Leader. I was just going to sort of repeat what Ben said. Is this is exactly why we have reserves?
Yeah. Because
nothing is set in stone, and I look at some of the pressures on education, and it's understandable that with the complexity of need for some of our pupils, that if you overlay the COVID situation, that transport for children with additional learning needs needs to be much more tailored. So there is an overspend of 82,000 on that to ensure that they can get to school safely. And so we'll continue to see how we can sort of tweak things, how we can move things around. But when we have a budget which is not far off 50% of the total budget in education, that a small increase or decrease either way can make quite a big difference. The only other thing I'd add is on that note, with all the sort of complexity halfway through the year, I'm happy to second the report.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good. Nobody else got any comments, then we'll move on to the next one, which is the capital monitoring for the period 1st of April 2021 to the 30th of September. And again, this just updates members with regards to it. The report details the current position, as it would, with regards to the capital programme, and particular note the following. One is the increasing cost for a number of schemes due to an uplift in plant and material costs, as Margaret was saying, in relation to some of the things she was talking about. Clearly, that has, in some respects, this is capital costs, obviously. Also, the grants received from Welsh Government to fund a number of initiatives, including the food fod in Penarth and the monies to support early years and childcare provision. There are things to note. The use of the Section 106 monies to support, amongst other things, sustainable transport and tree planting initiatives. The receipt of funding from Welsh Government to support active travel schemes. And the receipt of local transport funding to support a number of schemes in the Vale. Obviously, the impact of the pandemic and Brexit on this programme will continue to be monitored, but they are severe. Appendix 1 of the report contains the details of the programme on a scheme-by-scheme basis. But basically, what this report recommends is that Cabinet notes the progress made on this year's capital programme, that Cabinet refers this report to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. And more importantly, the Cabinet notes the use of the delegated authority as detailed in the report, and I won't go through them because they're there for you to read. Also, the Cabinet notes the use of the emergency powers as detailed in the report. And then finally, the Cabinet approves the changes, which are the ones we will make today, to the 21-22 and future years capital programme, again, as outlined in the report. There are a couple of new schemes in here in relation to some of those works, and some of those were carried out by emergency powers. And there are some new schemes which we put in that we will be dealing with today, and also things like the Ascola Derry minibus budget or payments, and then also the reprofiling the Band B schemes are set out in paragraphs 210. Also the development of some other things and some new schemes, including things like the Penarth Marina landslip works, and they'll be included as a new scheme in the capital programme. I don't intend to say any more about them unless anybody wants to make any comments. They are use of emergency powers, they are use of delegated authority, and they're the ones that we would deal with ourselves. Liz, I'll bring you in first, please.
I think I just was going to comment partially on the use of emergency powers, as we can see there, these are schemes mainly that we'd already agreed, whether it be through cabinet reports or whatever, and money has become available. We want stuff to happen, and the emergency powers are used in order to get that to work. And
many of those are because of the increases we talked about. So
yeah.
In order for the work to continue, you have to increase the budgets.
Yes.
Sorry.
But as you might imagine, the one that I would like to mention is the Penarth Food Pod, which I think it demonstrates how the council can act quickly, can be fleet of foot, and can do a tremendous amount of good when information and details showed that some of our communities were under extreme pressure through the pandemic, and that continues. And so there was a discussion on whether or not the existing community pod could be repurposed into providing a temporary food pod. That pod currently supports up to 50 families a week. I should imagine that will grow. I'm really thrilled that some additional funding has been located, and when I was there on Friday, the footings were done for a purpose-built food pod to be installed, hopefully before Christmas. And the the level of expectation locally is palpable, with families really seeing it as such a positive way of demonstrating support for the community. And I would personally like to say a huge thank you to our officers who have worked tirelessly to make this happen. They have pulled out all the stops, been incredibly flexible, and very, very supportive of the scheme. So I'm hoping that before Christmas we will see a sort of a separate food pod installed in St Luke's and able to continue the excellent work that's going on there. And then I will say that I'm also will second the recommendations of the report.
Thank you very much. Peter, you want to come in, please?
Yes, if I may, and uncannily enough, it's the preceding paragraph. But my deputy leader just mentioned paragraph 2.20. I'm going to mention 2.19, the Active Travel Fund grant. I think this is a meaningful, and material help to tackle climate environmental concerns, and with a total of over 2.5 million, I really do hope that it's going to increase active travel and, generally speaking, improve the health and well-being, and help reduce the air pollution and improve the air quality, and, generally speaking, make the Vale a better place for us to live in going forward. So I'm just very, very grateful. Thank you.
Okay, good. If there's nothing else and there's a seconded it, is everybody happy with that? Go forward. Okay, the next item is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report. This is reporting the Treasury activity. It has a range, and it's again a very comprehensive report, to be honest. A range of external influences that have impacted on the Treasury management activity of the Council during the period, and they include things like, obviously, COVID-19 has continued to impact on all economies across the world, not alone just Britain. In the UK, interest rates have remained low, but we're now seeing a pressure on prices, in particular utilities and fuel. In other countries, the economic recovery has tended to depend on their vaccination programs, which has impacted on how quickly they've been able to lift restrictions and they've had in place to manage the pandemic. Because this is a global issue, to be fair, and the global economic pressures during the year have included disruption to worldwide supply chains, and that's one of the things we talked about earlier. They've also increased costs of transport and increased problems in filling job vacancies, which are all contributing to a spike in an upward inflation and shortages in material on goods on the shelves, as we've all seen. Having reviewed this year's capital programme, the borrowing requirements of the Council have changed and are now estimated to be about £11.8 million in this financial year. This sum will fluctuate depending on the delivery of the capital programme. As I said, things can go up and things don't seem to be coming down, unfortunately. It's likely that the sum required will now be internally borrowed during 21-22, although with such a significant Public Works Loan Board repayment profile and some large sums projected for the HRA borrowing, the position will need to be kept under review to help manage the Council's interests and risks. The authority's investment strategy is to secure the best return, as you know, in its investments. And throughout the period under review, the authority has continued to use the broader range of investment tools, placing investments with other local authorities, the Debt Management Office, Treasury bills, money market funds and instant access accounts with our bank as Lloyds Bank PLC. Consideration is now being given to the possibility of opening a notice account with Santander Bank PLC, as this account benefits from a higher return, provided the required period of notice is given as to the withdrawal. It's also proposed to extend the maturity period of loans with other local authorities up to from 365 days, in other words, 1 year to 2 years. And the maximum deposit per institution would be £5 million, and taking into account reserves projections, it is proposed the maximum sum invested over 364 days will be restricted to £10 million in total. In order to do this, Cabinet and full Council approval is required in today's report. So the Treasury management strategy for the year established a range established a range of indicators, and the report details all of these have been taken and met in the first 6 months to the end of September. The report also confirms that all Treasury management activity has complied with the approved Treasury management strategy, the CIPFA Code of Practice, and all relevant legislation provisions. So in short, the recommendations are that the Treasury Management mid-year report for the period 1st of April to 30th September be considered and endorsed, that the latest Treasury Management indicators be considered and noted, that the report be forwarded to the next Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee for their consideration, that the changes to the investment limits be noted, that's the loans to the local authorities and the time period as well, and that the increase in the maximum maturity period for investment placed with other local authorities is taken to 2 years, with a maximum investment of £5 million per institution and no more than £10 million invested beyond the 364 days, and that be approved by ourselves at Cabinet today. And we recommend that this is taken to Council and approved by Council. And then finally, in order to do that, this report is forwarded to Council itself for approval. I don't know if anybody's got any comments to make, but one of the things that I noticed in the report is it gives a full breakdown of things like, I said it's a global issue. They talk about things like the USA Economic Review, the Eurozone Economic Review, the China Economic Review, Japanese world growth, etc. So it covers a wide range of topics, but clearly all those areas within the scope of our investments is worldwide, so it has to be considered. So I've moved the recommendations, and if everybody wants to say anything or just simply note it and second it.
And I'll formally second, Leader.
Okay, thank you. And again, as I say, that goes to scrutiny and then on to the Council. The next item is the one everybody's been waiting for. It's the initial review revenue budget proposals for 2022-23 and the medium-term financial plan for 21-22 to 24-25. Slightly different this year in that we've incorporated the two, so that some of the things that are discussed in the report itself, the figures, etc., will be found within the medium-term financial plan. So this presents the initial revenue budget proposals for 22-23. This does include, as I said, an updated medium-term financial plan, which has been produced as part of the initial budget proposals. The document does set out the contents of the budget setting process, linking the Council's strategic planning process with the budget process, ensuring consistency between the two. The plan attempts to match future predicted resources and expenditure, identify potential shortfalls, and provides the financial framework for the coming 3 years. Clearly, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic continues to be felt both operationally and financially. Funding has been received from Welsh Government, as I said, in the current financial year to help its financial position and the impact that we face. However, there's a huge uncertainty as to how this picture will develop. Therefore, it's very difficult to provide predictions for the coming year and beyond. The Council's budget is determined largely by the settlement provided by Welsh Government. The Council's provisional settlement for 22-23 has not yet been announced, but it will be announced, as we understand, on the 21st of December, with the final settlement due to be received on the 2nd of March 2022. As a result of this late announcement, a significant amount of preparation work for the budget will need to be completed prior to receiving the final settlement. The Council is obviously required under statute to fix the Council tax for 22-23 by the 11th of March 2022, and in order to do so, we'll have to agree a balanced revenue budget by the same date. So As a result of the delays of the announcement of the provisional settlement, assumptions have had to be made to go forward within this draft estimates with regard to Welsh Government scenarios for funding for the coming financial year. The plan is based on 4 different scenarios. These are a cash neutral settlement, a 1% reduction each year for the period of the plan, a 1% increase each year, and a settlement at the same level as the current financial year, which I think was 4.4%, so thereabouts. Within the draft estimates, the following has been assumed. No allowance has been made for price inflation. Normally that is taken up within departmental budgets. Since completing this report, the rate of inflation, however, has seen a considerable increase. Therefore, this assumption will need to be reviewed as part of the final budget process. When the report was initially considered, CPI was at a level of 3.2%. As of the last month's report, it's now 4.2%, which is a massive hike in anybody's terms. And clearly, some of the assumptions that were in this report now will have to be reconsidered. Also, the cost of staff pay awards has been fully funded. Members will be aware that the pay awards for the current year is yet to be agreed. So assumptions are included in relation to the current year and the coming years. In addition, the increase in the cost of NI payments, which have been introduced as part of the new health and social care tax, have been accounted for. And these costs total almost £4.5 million, £4.497 million to be exact. All non-pay cost pressures totaling £22.467 million are also fully funded within the report itself. Not they probably will all be eventually. There are no approved savings for the coming financial year. These scenarios have all modelled the council have been modelled relating to council tax, and they are, and as I said, an increase of 3.2 to reflect the level of inflation. That will now have to be addressed to 4.2%. A 3.9% increase each year, which is the same increase that we had in 21-22, and also increasing the level to the Welsh average, which will be 7.05% increase in council tax, and an increase thereafter of 3.58% to maintain our average income tax. At this time, what I normally do is usually say is there's always been an aspiration that we would be able to go to an average of within Wales, and as it says in that report, it would be 7.05%. The other thing that I've also talked about, we're trying to get to actually our SSA figure, which our supplementary standard assessment, which is basically where we're supposed to be, according to Welsh Government, spending to. If we did that, that would need an increase in council tax of 13.62%. So it just shows you how far short we are of SSA. Not that I'm suggesting that we should do that, but I'm just highlighting it as a point that needs to be considered. So the details of these scenarios are all within the report. As I said, at 3.2% for CPI, but it has to go to 4.2. Obviously, these assumptions will be assessed and challenged as part of the final budget process when more information becomes available. So the next steps is proposed to change the previous agreed timetable. Are you losing me because I keep on having a flash? It's proposed to change the previous agreed timetable, because I think because we're in such a position in terms of cost pressures, not knowing where we are, I think we need to include some extra meetings within the cycle. So it's proposed to change the previously agreed timetable for the approval of the final budget due to the late announcements, and that will enable the revised initial estimates to be considered by Cabinet on the 14th of February, and then sent to corporate performance and resources on the 17th of February. The final budget proposals will then be considered by Cabinet on the 28th of February, and then they will be taken straight forward to the full council on the 7th of March. So the recommendations within the report are that the initial revenue budget proposals for 22-23 be approved. Are you losing me, or am I losing somebody else?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, all right, because I think I'm losing somebody on the screen. The recommendations are the initial revenue budget proposals for 22-23 be approved for consultation with the relevant scrutiny committees and other consultees. 2, that the recommendations of scrutiny committee are passed to the corporate performance and resources scrutiny committee as the lead scrutiny committee in order that their views be forwarded to cabinet. And I would remind you that corporate performance is now changed from the 20th of December to the 22nd of December because the draft budget from Welsh Government is coming out on the 21st of December. So it would have been silly to have a meeting the night before when things change. The 3rd recommendation is the Cabinet considers and endorses the contents of the draft medium-term financial plan for 21-22 to 22-25. 4, the medium-term financial plan is also referred to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee for consideration with any amendment, any comments made by the committee being taken into account by Cabinet as part of the final proposals for 22-23. 5, the delegated authority is granted to the executive leader and cabinet member for performance resources, together with the managing director and the head of finance, section 1 finance officer, to review and agree the timetable for the completion and approval of the final budgets for 22-23. I think the only things you need to, one of the things I need to highlight is obviously within the appendix of the medium-term financial plan are the cost pressures, and the cost pressures, as I said, are substantial. They are, if I can get to the last page, 22 million, I think, or more. I hope you can still hear me. It's 22.467 million pounds, and it also shows the base budget at Appendix 3. Also attached there, as usual, is the analysis of reserves at Appendix 4, and clearly those things will all be reviewed during the course of the next few months. But this is the initial stage. It has to go to scrutiny committees, it has to go to the lead committee, and then it comes back to us for consideration, back out again, back into us, and then to council for ratification. But we do have to do it all by the 11th of March. I've said too much, so has anybody got any comments to make? Please. And I have lost you all.
No, I'm here, leader, if I could speak. I think that it's good to have the challenges ahead laid out so clearly, because over the next few months there will be a number of serious decisions to be made, so we need to have very serious discussions with colleagues in scrutiny committee, etc., to work out just how we're going to achieve a balanced budget. I think as you laid out, in terms of what lies ahead of us, inflation that's going up increasingly, fuel prices that are going up, and as much as it affects all of us in terms of filling up our tanks, then how do we get the refuse vehicles around to pick up stuff? How do we transport children to school? How do we take people to day centres in terms of social care? We've got we know that people are facing the cut in universal credit. We also know that there are increases in national insurance that affects our residents. It also affects our staff, and so we do have to have this. And I look at it and think, this is what I'm going to be thinking about when I wake up at 3:30 in the morning, as a lot of us do. It's a very hard 4 months ahead, and we will be going into it in depth. Looking at the cost pressures in terms of Appendix 2, I look and say, these are, in terms of education, these are some of our most vulnerable children that these cost pressures are related to. So again, this is going to be the discussion ahead of Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee to say, well, how do we deliver the education service that our children deserve, that our children should have? So, I'll leave it there, but our vision is of strong communities with a bright future. And somehow we've got to work our way through this and make sure that we can deliver that for them against a backdrop of what are horrendous pressures. On that note, I'll second the recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry if I've been told you didn't lose me, but I lost you. Peter, you next.
Yes, if I may, and I can assure you, I had no break in video or audio, so I think it's your concern is only for something that you're seeing and nobody else is experiencing. Really, just picking up on what the Deputy Leader's just said, that many of the cost pressures we already know are ongoing. And then there's another bunch that we can see or anticipate. Again, as Liz mentioned, national insurance and energy costs. And then I don't wish to risk sounding like a retired American politician. There's all those that we don't yet know that we face every year. So yes, a blooming difficult time to come. Thank you.
Everybody's really looking forward to it. Ben.
Thank you, Leader. We're going to be having debates about this, and it's absolutely right that as laid out, the scrutiny committees get into the detail, and I look forward to seeing that in-depth detail discussion. And I think it's worth highlighting point made there by the Deputy Leader. We have to present a balanced budget. And when Welsh Government are looking at how they distribute the additional money that in the UK and an English setting has been split disproportionately towards the NHS, I implore the Welsh Government to remember that in social care we cannot have a deficit budget. NHS boards, trusts are able to, but we have to balance it. I have written to various members of the Senedd in response to questions as Cabinet member and highlighted the cost pressures, as I did earlier today, in terms of the cost of increasing care costs. And these shouldn't be placed onto the burden of the council taxpayer if we can do anything to avoid that. So none of us here are looking to do this, but there is a duty upon us to have a balanced budget. And so in these coming months, I would like to have a constructive conversation about how we build for those stronger communities, as Liz discussed. And ultimately, I don't want it just to boil down to some horrendously long 7-hour council meeting in March, where we're talking in plain terms about percentage numbers, as if that is the answer. Ultimately, we're going to be discussing a budget of services. There are people in our communities, Deputy Leader's laid out, for education, those who need care. We are here to serve everybody. And the visible things we see that Councillor King has referred to, all of these matter to our residents, and we need to understand how we can best do that. And so if that means utilising reserves, then we will do that. But if we've got recurring costs, then we need to understand that government and other funding sources are going to provide the level needed to give that service. So I don't see this as anything. This is an opportunity to have that constructive conversation. And having shared, in the social care setting, shared experiences throughout the 22 local authorities when we meet regularly as a Cabinet member network, these are not isolated. We are not the only council who is presenting this level of pressure. This will not go unnoticed by Welsh Government, or certainly shouldn't. But clearly, we're all waiting to the last minute, and there's a lot of work that our colleagues and officers in finance are going to have to do because of this late notice. And once again, before they've done the work this time, I'd like to thank them for the diligent way they've laid out this report. The detail that I feel I have, when ultimately we have no detail in some ways, is incredible. To have scenarios, and they are scenarios because we don't know the outcome. If we had more outcome, then we'd have less scenarios. So I'll stop there. I think the actual debate about the things we fund and what we do with those, that is absolutely right for scrutiny and council and questions to council and for members of the public to ask questions. But I do hope we get into the detail of understanding the sort of services we want to offer and how we can work in partnership to deliver them. That's what I wanted to say at this time. Thank you, Leader.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Well, it's absolutely right. You know, the report, as I said, if you want to look at the detail, it's in the medium-term financial plan, and on page 10 at 228, it gives you the matching resources and the scenarios, as you said. One of which obviously looks at whether or not Welsh Government will give us the same as they had last year, which was 4.42% increase. I don't know whether they will. It could be more, it could be less. But one of the other things that I know, because I too have had discussions with ministers, and I do virtually every week at the moment, in relation to the problems we have in terms of councils, and obviously social services is by far the biggest one across the board. You know, we have obviously had difficulty, and one of the things that people perhaps don't realise is some of the things that people take for granted, things like in Peter's area of waste refuge, you know, waste disposal, etc. You know, lighting your streets, fixing the potholes, all that sort of stuff has to come out of a very small bit of the council pot. You know, when you consider education, social care takes up nearly half of it, then there's not a lot to go around. And it is a consideration. I've talked to Welsh Government, and I know that they've talked about, oh, we'll try and help with grants for things like social care. The point I keep saying to them is a grant is no good. A hypothecated grant is no good because it only lasts for 1 year. It has to be has to form part of our base budget. In other words, we can guarantee not only getting it this year, but next year as well. And that's one of the things that we have to look at, because when you have this amount of cost pressures, and let's be fair, they are not, these cost pressures have not been just like finger in the air thinking, what do I need now? It's things we actually do need. It's a requirement, not a wish list. And I think that's the point that everybody has to realise is we're between a rock and a hard place this year. This has got to be, I have to say, and I've been doing this a long time. This is the worst scenario that I've ever seen in terms of cost pressures. Normally, you can think about taking some of them out, thinking, oh, we can probably do without that, or we can pick that up somewhere else. We've got to the stage where we can't. This is seriously the worst, and that's the reason that I've added those extra meetings in to try and air out all the comments coming from anybody. And I think this year of all years, and I know it's an election year, this year of all years, people have got to be honest and not play politics with this budget, because this budget is serious, and is serious not for us as politicians. It's serious for the people who live in the Vale of Glamorgan and rely on our services. And I think that's the message that has to go out, that this is a serious budget. It has to be handled seriously. So I can say no more, because there's a long way to go yet, but and there's a lot of work to be done. So can I thank you all for your comments and my prattling on. I think we've all agreed that goes forward with the recommendations. The next one I want to come to is the initial housing revenue account budget for 22-23, and obviously the revised budget for 21-22. The report does, as normal, present an amended budget for the housing revenue account for 21-22 and the initial budget proposal. So each local housing authority, as we are one of the 11, is required to set a budget for their housing revenue account, normally known as the HRA. On an annual basis, the budget must be set so that the housing revenue account reserve at the end of the year is not in a deficit position. The budget must be reviewed during the year and appropriate steps taken if the HRA reserve is heading into deficit. The report does detail the budget for 21-22 and it has been reviewed and the position has changed, resulting in a likely outturn of the year of an adverse variance of £11.085 million, which sounds bad, but isn't, because what it means is there's £11 million more than we thought we were going to have. It's the way the accounting works with these things. At the end of 2021-22, the level of housing account reserve was at a higher level than previously projected, and therefore the proposed changes to the operation budget will result in a reduction in the balance of this reserve to bring it in line with the level required for the housing business plan. So the main changes that we're proposing are that the provision for bad debt has been reduced based on forecasting rent arrears to the 31st of March 2022, which does include an assessment for the impact of COVID-19. There has been a reduction in the capital financing costs as a result of lower level borrowing required to fund the capital programme. And the level of capital expenditure to be financed from revenue has been increased in the year as monies from the HRA reserve are being used to fund some of the capital expenditure. So this has reduced the requirement to borrow to fund the HRA capital programme and therefore will have a positive impact on the revenue account going forward. These changes will leave a balance on the HRA reserve at the end of year of £915,000, which is in line with the minimum amount required as per the HRA business plan. The initial budget for 22-23 has been drafted and is outlined in the report. These estimates will be subject to review once the guidance has been received from Welsh Government with regard to setting of rents for 22-23. Currently, we can't set any rents for 22-23 because we have to wait for Welsh Government to give us some figures, and sometimes it's related to CPI. And I think this year I think they'll probably go away from that figure because CPI, as I said to you, was 4.2%, which is very high. So the estimates for 22-23 propose a small surplus of £8,000. The details of the budget are attached to the Appendix 1 to the report. So the next steps are for the estimates. They're now to be referred to the appropriate scrutiny committee for consideration. Any comments will be considered by Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny as the lead committee. The Budget Working Group, as usual, will consider the budget proposals. Cabinet and Council will consider the final proposals in February and March 2022 respectively, and therefore what's recommended is that 1. The amended housing revenue account budget for 21-22 as set out in Appendix 1 be approved and submitted to the Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee for consideration to provide a context for Recommendation 2. And Recommendation 2 is that the initial housing revenue account proposals for 22-23 be approved for consultation with the Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee. 3. That the recommendations of the Homes and Safe Scrutiny Committee are passed to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee as the lead scrutiny committee in order for their views to be taken forward to Cabinet. And 4. The increase for rent and other services are subject to a future report to Cabinet as soon as the information is available from Welsh Government. I will formally move those. I don't know if anybody's got any comments in relation to anything that I've said thus far. So is that agreed?
Yeah.
Seconded?
I'm happy to second, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is a report in relation to the initial capital proposals for 22-23 to 26-27. The provisional general capital funding for 22-23 again has not been announced by Welsh Government, and it's expected, as I said earlier, on the 21st of December, with the final settlement due on the 1st of March. As the provisional settlement isn't known, the level of capital funding included in the report has assumed that the Council will receive the same level of general funding in 22-23 as it received in this year's financial year, and will remain the same for the remainder of this programme. Assumptions have also been made with regard to the major repairs allowance which we receive from Welsh Government for housing services It's been assumed that this will remain at 2.77 million in the coming year and throughout the period of the capital programme. And as in the previous years, all services have been requested to identify possible new capital schemes, and these have been reviewed in accordance with the agreed criteria, and that's set out in the report itself. All the capital bids received totaled £15.583 million in 22-23 and £30.791 million over the next 5-year period. These bids are shown in Appendix 2 to the report. As the draft settlement for 22-23 has not been confirmed, it's proposed that, due to the uncertainty in the level of funding that we will be provided, no new schemes will be approved for inclusion in the capital programme at this stage. A further assessment will be carried out by the Budget Working Group once the level of funding is known and consultation has taken place. The report also outlines the 5-year school investment programme as part of the 21st Century Schools programme. Programme totals £43.9 million for the coming 3 years. The full value of Band B programme is £137.2 million, with £81.6 million being funded by Welsh Government. And you can see the details of that in paragraphs 2.21 and 2.22. The predicted spend on housing improvement plan is £43.4 million in 22-23. The report details how these two programmes will be funded, including the assumptions made regarding the use of earmarked reserves. And again, that can be seen in paragraphs 2.24. So the next steps, as normal, is that they'll be considered by the scrutiny committees and the Budget Working Group for final consideration by Cabinet in February and Council in March 22. So the report recommends the following: that the initial capital programme proposals for 22-23 to 26-27 be approved with consultation with the relevant scrutiny committees. 2, that any recommendations of the scrutiny committees are passed to Corporate Performance Resources as the lead scrutiny committee in order for their views to be forwarded to Cabinet. I've got nothing more to say on that. It is a figure we're still waiting on things. We're assuming no new schemes, but the report is before you for passing to other members for consideration. So if only Liz.
Thank you, Leader. I'm delighted to second, but I think that, as you mentioned, the 21st Century Schools programme has been astonishing. By the new year, we'll have completed 3 secondaries and 2 primary schools, and we've now got others ready at the starting gate to move forward. I think we need to note not only the educational benefits from capital programmes such as this, but also the community benefits. And we've had reports before on the community benefits scheme that we run. And procurement such as this actually recycles huge amounts of money into our local communities. So that if you look at the community benefits in the last 2 years on the 21st Century Schools programme, that's created over 1,100 local jobs. Over 50% of the spend has actually been procured locally, and we want to do a huge amount more. It will be a challenge because we talked about cost pressures in terms of the revenue budget, the cost pressures in terms of capital programmes such as this, where the price of raw materials is going up at ridiculous levels. Sometimes you're talking about a 70-80% increase in the costs of raw materials, things like steel and that sort of thing. So it is a challenge, but the 21st Century Schools Band B programme runs until 2024. We're already starting to plan Band C, but over the coming or the next 2 years, we're looking forward to delivering a huge amount more for Vale of Glamorgan.
Okay, good. I take it nobody else wants to come in, I don't think. No, I take it that's a second then as well. Good. In that case, I will move on to the next item, which is item 15, the council tax reduction scheme. Approval is sought from Cabinet to confirm the re-adoption of the council tax reduction national scheme for 22-23. For 2014-15 and subsequent years, the Welsh Government made new regulations on which the National Council Reductions scheme was based. It was recommended that the Council confirms each year its adoption of the scheme and discretions. There are two sets of regulations governing the scheme, one which established a single national framework scheme, which would be imposed on any council that failed to adopt its own scheme, and the second of which sets out the national requirements that each building authority had to satisfy, and also enabled additional areas of local discretion that authorities might wish to implement. Welsh local authorities have until the 31st of January each year to adopt the scheme, exercising any of the discretions permitted under the prescribed requirement regulations. This requires a decision by full council. If authority fails to adopt a council tax reduction scheme by that date, the default scheme will apply. It's therefore proposed that the Cabinet recommend to Council the adoption of the discretions allowed in previous years, in the previous years for 22-23, and these are outlined in the body of the report. So it's recommended that the Cabinet recommends to full Council that the Council Tax Reduction Scheme and Prescribed Requirements Wales Regulations SI 2013-3029, which are the prescribed requirement regulations, and the Council Tax Scheme Prescribed Requirements and Default Scheme Wales Amendment Regulations 2014, SI 2014/66 be adopted, that any amendments to the regulations made by Welsh Government are reflected in the scheme. 3, that the national scheme is adopted with the following discretions: that the Council should continue to allow extended payments up to a maximum of 4 weeks, that the Council should continue to disregard war widow and war disablement pensions in assessing income for council tax reduction. 6, that the Council should continue to allow backdated reductions for a period up to 26 weeks. And finally, that the Cabinet approves the use of urgent decision procedures set out in section 1414 of the Council Constitution in order to enable the Council Tax Reduction Scheme to be approved by Council by the 31st of January 2022 and be in place for implementation on the 1st of April. So in other words, it will be going to the December the 6th Council meeting. So can I formally move? It's something which we always do, something which we have to do, and if we don't do it, something would be imposed upon us which we don't want. So is that agreed?
Yeah, and formally seconded.
Thank you. The next item is the Council Tax and Occupied Dwellings report. This again is an executive decision by Cabinet. The purpose of the report is to seek confirmation that the Council will not grant any discount in council tax for long-term empty properties and furnished second homes for the 22-23 financial year. The Welsh regulations prescribe 3 classes of dwellings, of which Welsh local authorities have discretion to consider the discounts allowable. The first 2 classes, classes A and B, are unoccupied furnished dwellings, and for these classes, discounts are allowable between 10% and 50%. The third class, Class C, is for unoccupied unfurnished dwellings, for which the Welsh Government has the discretion to consider the Welsh local authorities have discretion to consider discounts up to a maximum of 50%. The Council current policy is not to allow any discounts on unoccupied dwellings in classes A, B and C. So today's report recommends basically a reaffirmation of what we've done before. The Cabinet reaffirms its previous decision that no discounting be allowed in 22-23 in respect of unoccupied dwellings as defined in classes A, B, C and C to the Council Tax Prescribed Class of Dwellings Wales Regulations 1998 as amended. So in other words, it's doing the same as we did last year, when we changed our status. So there are no 50% or anything else reductions. So is that agreed?
Yes. And formally seconded.
Thank you very much. The next item is hopefully a simple report. It's preset payment dates. Basically, we pay out money on a regular basis. So this is seeking approval for preset payments dates in 22-23. The council, as a billing authority, is required to notify precepting authorities, town and community councils, police commissioners, etc., of the proposed preset payment dates for 22-23 by the 31st of December. This is a decision by Cabinet. The report recommends the following. The payments due to the Police and Crime Commissioner for South Wales be paid in 12 equal instalments on the last working day of each month. The payments due to the Town and Community Councils be paid in 3 instalments on the last working day of April, August and December 2022. I hope that's accepted, because that's what we always do anyway. Yeah, okay, good.
And formally seconded.
Thank you very much. Next item is again is the draft Vale Glamorgan Council Annual Delivery Plan for 22-23. I make no apology. I'm going to read some of the stuff out of the executive summary because I think that covers it very well. The report sets out the draft annual delivery plan, which has been developed, and the proposed consultation and the timetable for the plan, which is aligned to the Council's 4 wellbeing objectives. The plan details activities that will be undertaken in 2022 to deliver those objectives, which will be reflected in the annual service plans, together with the service improvement targets. The publishing of our wellbeing objectives at the start of the financial year will enable us to meet our statutory obligations of the performance duties of the Local Government and Election Wales Act 2021 and the Wellbeing and Future Generation Wales Act 2015, both of which require us to set objectives and report. And under the Wellbeing and Future Generation Wales Act, the Council is required to publish its wellbeing objectives by the 31st of March each year to keep these under review. Our corporate plan and wellbeing objectives are associated with commitments for 22-23, as outlined in the draft annual delivery plan, and they will be reflected in the service plans for 22-23. Work has commenced to develop these service plans, as you well know, which will be presented to the relevant scrutiny committees in due course, hopefully during the course of the new year, with proposed several improvement targets for 22-23. The recommendations are that the Cabinet approves the draft annual working plan, which is at Appendix A, for the basis of consultation, as described in the report. That Cabinet approves the consultation approach and timetable as set out in this report. That the Cabinet notes the approach taken this year to the draft annual delivery plan and to the relationship with the annual service plans. And that Cabinet refers this report to all scrutiny committees as part of the programme of consultation, requesting any comments to be shared with the Head of Policy and Business Transformation to inform the revisions to the annual delivery plan. The Council will publish a new corporate plan. It did publish one in April 2020, and that would take us over a 5-year period, and it has allowed us to deliver the 4 new wellbeing objectives that were there at the time. In summary, basically, the drafting plan has been considered, and it does consider the following options, which are considered within the report at paragraph 2.6, and I'm not going to read them out, but it is structured, as I say, on the wellbeing objectives, and it will contain actions that we've taken across the whole organisation to contribute to the delivery of the of these objectives. In terms of the plan itself, it has 6 themes, and they're covered in paragraph 2.9 of the report. So there are things like Project Zero, to deliver our commitment to tackle climate change, a community capacity, which increases our capacity within our communities to ensure that they have a stronger voice and are able to influence and shape our services. It's hardship, which we're also looking to meet the needs of those experiencing hardship, as indeed also in terms of care and support to meet the needs of our most vulnerable residents. Also continue our transformation programme, which brings together the community and tackling climate change, but also the use of our technology and assets, our workforce development, initiatives, opportunities to change how we work across all services, particularly in education, from education to social care to waste management, and also look at the infrastructure, investing in our schools and housing, which we've seen within the reports we currently looked at earlier on. The ADP consultation will highlight the work being carried out. Appendix B shows how the actions across the wellbeing objectives will be contribute to these 6 themes. We'll continue to work obviously with the public sector and other organisations, third sector, etc. We would obviously like to consult in a normal way, but still down to the pandemic, we have to do it slightly differently. But the timetable, which is shown on paragraph 215, is the one we're walking forward, and we're looking for that to be approved for consultation. I don't know if everybody's got any comments to make in relation to it, but clearly it's an ongoing process which we continue to do, and we will consult upon and then finalise later in the year. So if you're happy with that, I formally move. Is that formally seconded?
I'll formally second.
Thank you very much. The next item is the Q2 sickness absence report. Again, it shows the absence reports for the 6 months to April to September. It does show that the absence levels have returned to similar to 2019-20, which was prior to COVID-19. And obviously previous year, last year, we saw some low levels of absentees, but it has increased in common with across the board, in all honesty. The absence rates are set out in paragraph 4.1, and it shows an increase from 3.4 days lost per full-time equivalent, which was last year, to 4.95 days lost per full-time equivalent. And the annual target figures were set at 4.1 days lost per full-time equivalent. So if you look at the table on paragraph 4.1, it does show that all elements other than learning and skills are up on previous year. But to be honest, that's something I would have expected anyway, in that there was even though we were in pandemic, most people were working from home, and let's be fair, sometimes what happened, and we think we experienced it all, is if you didn't feel too well today, this morning, you may still continue to work in the afternoon because you can work remotely from home. However, we do have obviously front-facing staff. And clearly, they wouldn't be in terms of that. But all directorates have target figures, and as I say, all of them are up at the moment. The tables do show a breakdown on each month. But what's also important, as far as I can see, is that it also looks at the short-term and long-term absences and the reasons for them. And it shows that the short-term absences relate to 20%, whereas the long-term absences, in other words, 4 weeks or more, represents 80% of the picture. But what it also does show within the report is the top reasons for lost days. And quite a lot of them are stress, non-work related. And I have to say, I'm not surprised about that either, because I think COVID-19 has had a marked effect on people and the way that they have to live their lives and try to do their work. So I'm not surprised in that at all. And clearly the other one is musculoskeletal, which again is something related to the type of work that people deal with. And obviously there are some stress work-related issues. And again, I'm not surprised at that either, because working on teams is a gem sometimes, except when you think that things have gone down and they haven't, like I just did. It gives you stress whether you like it or not. So I think it's a report which is warts and all. Yeah, I think we have to look at everything. We do have in place employee assistance programs, which we all know about, with things like the Care-Based Employee Assistance Programme, which will remain. We've also ensured that the staffing have received training, and there's a lot of support given to that. We still continue to have health promotion, things like the flu vaccines. We have a new occupational health booking system. We've extended the wellbeing packages. that we promote things like the ergonomic risk assessments. We now have 40 trained champions within the authority, or somebody can go to for assistance, for help, for guidance, for just to talk to, really. And obviously performance management is set out in 4.28, which shows that the elements of managing sickness has to be addressed by each of the departments in turn. But it is not meeting our criteria as yet. I think we have to do some work on it. But the thing that is striking, I think, is the long terms. 80% of some of those figures, and I think Peter's got his hand up and he's now disappeared. So he's back. So I don't know if you want to come in, Peter.
Thanks, Lead. I was just shutting a door. I think someone's about to start cutting some grass. That's why. Can I just say that I agree with all of your comments, and I would just like to add that in addition to some of my earlier ones made this afternoon, which are contributing factors perhaps to sickness, absence, and notably stress and anxiety. But regarding neighbourhood services, just say that whilst the figures are a little disappointing, a large proportion of our staff do physically demanding frontline jobs. Absolutely. And they need to be able to sustain high energy levels during their working hours with little scope for a recuperative break. And additionally, quite a large number contribute part-time to the council while juggling other commitments, not least caring responsibilities. And I don't think that's exclusive to my service area, no. But I do think we need to remember that does sometimes make it a little more difficult for those folk to take the time out to rest and recover as easily as it may be for others. So I mostly have huge respect and sympathy for anybody who feels a little bit stressed.
Absolutely. As I said, people think working from home is non-stressful, and sometimes it's actually adds stress to people, particularly if somebody relies on work in order to actually go out and have not a social life, but to have a social interaction with people. And that doesn't help mental awareness either, thankfully. Thankfully, we're dealing with it, but clearly there's an element in this report which talks about the employee assistance program, which is extremely good, and obviously there's a new volunteering policy which we considered, and the fact we got the 40 trained mental health champions whose role involved promoting health campaigns, encouraging people to participate, etc., and being role models for other people. So it is what it is. The recommendations are that the report and the 6-month April to September sickness figures provided Appendix A be noted, that is be referred to corporate performance and resources for consideration. With any comments referred back to Cabinet for further consideration. But it is something that our managers are always on top of, in fairness, and we do have this regular breakdown each month. Some of it is not a surprise to me, I have to say. Any comments from anyone else? Or are you happy to move on? Eddie, you want to come in?
I'm going to jump in. I'm happy to second it because Liz is going to do that. But say with it, I just. It's going to go to scrutiny and come back to us, but clearly, from my point of view, when I've been discussing it with team managers and heads of services, the expectations has changed somewhat over the last 18 months or so, and it's a challenge to get them to reduce their hours just to meet all the deadlines that we're putting in particular this time of year with all the budget setting and everything else. It's just a recognition that those measures that have been put in place will take some time to come to fruition, but clearly I just want to make a comment that I hear the comment sometimes that they aren't producing, not realising it's people that we're talking about, and I just want to counter that, because certainly as a council we are performing in such a good way. And going back to the annual delivery plan, we've set some aspirations and some good things in place. So it's just recognition that it's the people that do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the other thing is you can't forget, even though it says last year was due to COVID, we still have people suffering from COVID, either within the family or themselves. And sometimes they have to isolate. And if they're isolating, they can't come to work. And if somebody is ill and they've got caring responsibilities as well within that period, then that causes an issue, because let's be fair, we have quite a lot of staff who have young children, and they've been suffering in silence in many respects. So it's not, COVID has not gone away, and we do have some who've got long COVID and they come back and then they have to go off again. We have some staff with long COVID, and long COVID is not a nice thing. So it's something we have to remember. So although the levels are not as where we expected them to be or where we set them, maybe we need to review to see whether or not our expectations were too great, particularly straight after the pandemic. But it's something I think we need to reflect on, and maybe ask our managers to go away and look to see where they are. And as I said, the 20%, 80% split short-term, long-term absences is something else too. So, we have to look after our staff. They are the bread and butter of this organisation. They're the ones that actually carry out the work, and we have to be thankful that they are there. And if we need to give them more support, then we need to give them more support. Simple as that, really. Okay, I shunted on too long. End of my report. So now I'm going to give the chattel over to Margaret, because there's the first one is a part one report. No, it isn't. Is it? Yes, it is. No, it isn't. It's a disposal of a small parcel of housing land owned at land at Barry Road.
Yeah, it's just one report for this one. Thank you, Leader. This is the council owns various small parcels of land, which borders on adjusting private owned properties, and is not suitable for development. So someone has come forward and asked about these small plots, and this one is on Barry Road, and so we're just going in and looking at, but we'd have to advertise if we do go out. We just can't hand it over to someone and say this is your land now. But the council has received an inquiry to buy a small piece of land on Barry Road, and that is held for the purpose it is a Housing Act from 1985 and is currently managed by or under the control of the Housing Department. The parcel of land is identified on plan at Appendix A. So you can see it's only a small piece of land, but someone has declared an interest. But there is 7 recommendations. I'm not going to read them all. You can see what they are, and we will see if anybody else comes forward.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. It's parcel of land owned by in the designation of housing. Somebody's has to own it. Clearly, because it's public open space, it has to be advertised. If there's any objections, it'll come back to us. If there's no objections, this gives us the authority to continue. Clearly, if they buy it, then obviously that the person who's purchasing it will have to cover the costs, etc., as per normal. So the recommendations are, as you say, on page 2, recommendations 1 to 7. And you're right, I'm not going to read them out either, unless anybody really wants me to. If the monitoring officer tells me I have to, I'll do it. Otherwise, I will formally second the recommendations. It's straightforward. I've seen the piece of land. It is very small, and clearly somebody just wants to make it into the garden or whatever. But if there's any objections, we'll see it again. If not, this gives the authority to the monitoring officer, legal, democratic, to serve notice and to carry on with the advertisement, etc. Okay, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody happy with that? Good. The next item is Is it Leader?
Debbie Miles want to say something?
Oh.
Thank you. Just in case you didn't read the message in the chat bar notes, just to agree, no need to read out the recommendations in the report.
I'm very pleased about that. Thank you very much. Right. Agenda item 21, the Buttrell's Estate Environment Improvement Scheme 2021-22. This seeks advice of Cabinet on the tender process, so it is a Part 1 report. Margaret, take it.
Thank you very much, Lead. This is just the Part 1. There is a Part 2 later on. This report seeks to advise Cabinet of the tender process for the range of environment improvements to works on the Buttrell's estate. It's been happening for a long time. It includes the gardens of houses, bungalows and flats, and we're hoping to put it into a reasonably nice condition for the residents. I know they're all excited about it, so I will take it. There is only one recommendation, that the Cabinet notes the content of the report, and I will go to when it comes to under Part 2.
Okay, that's fair enough. It's I've seen some of the pictures and things, and they look really nice, and there'll be much improvement. And again, it's part of the quality housing standards work. So that's brilliant. Good. Thank you very much. Everybody agree that? Yes. Good. Yeah. Next item, item 22, from the Cabinet, for the Cabinet Member Social Care and Health. Excuse me. It's the Corporate Safeguarding Mid-Term Report. Ben, over to you, please.
Thank you, Leader. And despite it being item 22, this is obviously a very important subject, and something which, as the safeguarding champion, I get involved with throughout the year. On the corporate safeguarding group, and this report provides a summary of the activity that's been undertaken in relation to the corporate arrangements for safeguarding across the council, and to provide assurance regarding the safeguarding activity that's been taking place. So there is a corporate responsibility to ensure that there are effective arrangements in place for safeguarding children and adults who require specific council services. And this report provides a mid-year update on the effectiveness of those arrangements and the developments to date. And as I said, the Corporate Safeguarding Group, of which I'm a member, ensures that there is scrutiny and assurance of the corporate safeguarding arrangements. And here, this is where it comes into the sphere. I think the reflections, I should say, are that things haven't stopped, and they didn't stop during the worst of 2020, and the Corporate Safeguarding Group continues to meet. It's noted under 2.2 that we've maintained regular meetings since April 21, and the recommendations are fairly simple. I'll just read those out. The Cabinet considers the work undertaken to improve corporate arrangements for safeguarding and protection of children and adults. The Cabinet continues to receive 6 monthly reports on work carried out to improve corporate safeguarding arrangements and its effectiveness, and that this report is referred to all scrutiny committees for consideration. Certainly, from my perspective as the safeguarding champion, and seeing the work at a corporate level, and then as an LEA appointed governor at various different schools in the Vale, to hear that the support that schools receive on safeguarding, particularly from the Vale, is they always report back to me that that's outstanding, and the work we do is crucial to looking after those who need that support and need safeguarding. So I so move those recommendations and ask for a seconder.
Okay, I'm very happy to second it, because as you say, you know, as it says in 2.8, the policy is that all employees, volunteers, including school governors, elected members, contractors, and partners, all go through induction and training, which is good and important to continue. So I'm happy to move the recommendations, and can I thank you for the work that both you and the Corporate Safeguarding Group do, because they do a sterling work. And they keep people safe. Good.
I will certainly communicate that at our next meeting of the Corporate Safeguarding Group. Good,
thank you. If you want to make it, you can put it into a recommendation if you want. So we thank all the work that's been considered. So
yes, yeah, I think if you're happy to second me on that, we'll add a recommendation to formally thank the Corporate Safeguarding Group and the associated officers for the the work that they continue to do in safeguarding children and adults.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you. Next item again is to Ben. It's about appointment of outside bodies, because we've had a letter, and I think Ben, you take this one.
Yes, thank you, Leader. As you're probably aware, there's a number of different outside bodies who ask the council to provide representatives, and that is something which comes up regularly to Cabinet just after our annual meetings. We received a letter from the Cardiff and Vale Community Health Council, which is attached as an appendix to this report, outlining their wish to have a change of membership owing to the 3 members. Well, it lays it out in the letter. 3 members concerned not attending sufficiently to aid their work. Now, clearly, there are a lot of different factors on everybody's time. And so this report seeks to open that up for us to nominate 3 different members. So it's to seek Cabinet approval to grant delegated powers to the Operational Manager Demographic Services in liaison with liaison for the Leader of the Council to identify and nominate 3 new members to replace councillors Christine Cave, Rachel Nugent-Finn and Leighton Rowlands to represent the Council on Cardiff and Vale Community Health Council until the local government elections in May 2022. And the recommendations are the Cabinet be requested to grant these designated powers to the Operational Manager Democratic Services. I'm repeating myself. The recommendation 1 is a rewording of what I've just said, and recommendation 2 is around assuring that there are no barriers basically in place to people being able to attend these outside bodies, and encouraging those members to avail themselves of the travelling subsistence allowances so that they are not barred from taking part. It's worth saying that this is not necessarily needing to be 3 members of the council. Clearly, everybody has time pressures, and perhaps there are people we work with in our forums or community groups that may be interested in coming across and doing this work. Clearly, I think the community health councils are going to become even more important over the coming months, as Welsh Government has certainly aspirations for including them more into the quality of the services received and how inspections are. So we really need to make sure that we are able to send representatives who will be able to give the required time to make the most of that. So with that in mind, these recommendations as written, I would so move, and following on from that, no doubt there'll be an open call for 3 members to be nominated.
Indeed, and we could call to our other partners and organisations that we are combined with. Okay, is everybody happy with that? Clearly, there was a letter asking us to do something, so we've done it. Doesn't preclude anybody coming forward again if they want to, but clearly there are time restraints on everybody. Okay, in that case, I don't have any other items which are urgent under part 1. So what I will be doing is going into part 2, because we have items for discussion under part 2, which follow on from the earlier reports on today's agenda, namely the Margaret's housing one. As these matters are considered confidential for particular reasons, we'll need to move into a private session where confidential matters can be discussed under part 2. Therefore, I'm going to ask the Cabinet Officer to stop the recording of this open session and ensure that no members of the public are present after this juncture, and only allow the relevant parties to remain to hear the detail of the items to be discussed, and that following the meeting, the outcome of the part 2 discussions will be formally captured as part of the minutes of the meeting, advising all parties of the final decisions of the Cabinet for this item. So can I ask the Democratic Services to make sure that those people who shouldn't be here are no longer here? And can I ask you to stop the recordings, and can you then tell me when the recording